aren't able to make it. So welcome everyone. I'm going to start the show. Um, so welcome everyone. My name is Alex Beck. I'm the Welcoming Communities Manager here at the Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation. Many of you know me as a longtime workforce and education program manager. And now my focus is predominantly on supporting new Vermonters, both in the workplace and beyond. So the Welcoming Communities Project is in part funded by the Boston Federal Reserve Bank through the Working Communities Initiative. And what you're looking at right now is really the vision that um, this initiative has around supporting new Vermonters in our communities and our economies. As an economic development organization and as a workforce organization, our smallest circle is, of course, the workplace. That's why we're all here today. Um, I think a lot of us are also part of this second tranche of work and looking at, as employers, how can we expand our capacity to support and recruit folks of immigrant backgrounds in particular. Um, and then, of course, if we're doing that and our community systems and partners are also stepping up, and we have all this other systems around like our transportation partners and our housing partners, as folks, fall into place in this larger system of welcoming, our community will not only be more economically successful, but it'll be more vibrant, and it'll be a nicer and better place to live, work, and just be. But that's not exactly why you're all here. Again, our focus is really to expand our ability to welcome diverse populations in the workplace and out, um, and really looking at the systems that support it. As of right now, I believe, and I'd be happy for someone for ECDC to correct me in the chat, we've welcomed around 200 folks to the region to date with an annual estimate, we'll say, because it does fluctuate of around 175 to 125 new folks in our being welcomed into our community annually, which is fantastic. I'm going to provide a very quick overview about how refugee resettlement works, because it's important as an employer who's working with some of these populations to understand what that means. And so very quickly, there are federally designated organizations called VOLAGs, volunteer organizations, who partner with our federal government, with the State Department and Department of Homeland Security, who are essentially receiving new Vermonters. They could be formal refugees. Many of our Afghans are parolees, humanitarian parolees. We'll talk about that in a sec. But generally speaking, for one of these organizations, and there's two in Vermont, to receive someone is through the federal government, through that refugee resettlement program. Here in Southern Vermont, we're lucky enough to have the ECDC, Ethiopian Community Development Council, operating in Windham and Bennington counties. So they are the point people. They are the organization who are bringing folks in from wherever they're coming from in partnership with our federal government. So new Vermonters, as they arrive, they have a case manager and they have certain resources and support available through ECDC and their volunteer networks. So as you're working with folks, depending on how recently they've arrived, they may have a case manager that is working with them to do all the things that are required, getting their social security numbers, getting doctor's appointments, all of those, children enrolled in school. So the first 90 days is pretty chaotic because they're really catching up with all the things about settling into a new place, including being oriented to the workforce and getting their first jobs. So first and foremost, something exciting and new is happening in Southern Vermont. We thought we'd be good at this, and it turns out we are doing a pretty decent job at it. And I think it's because of the nature of our community and, of course, the support of our employers and the partners, both formal and informal, that we have doing this work together. So the BDCC provides the majority of employment services for new Vermonters in partnership with ECDC and their case man and their employment services manager. You'll see Amir and Abdul in just a few minutes. They'll wave and introduce themselves, and you'll learn about their process a bit more. But between the two organizations and our partners working collaboratively, 80% of new Vermonters have found jobs that we've worked with. 48 different employers across all different sectors have recruited and hired these folks successfully. We're also supporting a lot of new arrivals and getting industry recognized credentials. And through, again, a variety of different sectors. And that will continue to grow as we learn more about folks' interests and abilities. And also, the more employers we have in a sector engaging with us, the more reliably we can plan trainings. If we know that there's a certain number of jobs available in a sector, then we have the confidence that a training for that sector will lead to high wage, high opportunities for our folks. And so that's really where partnering with employers isn't just good for the recruitment and onboarding perspective, but also that if we're designing training programs for people who are new to our community, we want those trainings to prepare them for your jobs. It's the best way to say it. And last, but I think what's most important that shows the partnership around success is that New Vermonters in Windham County on average earn a higher wage than New Vermonters in Chittenden County. And despite the disparity in wages generally between the two regions, and we don't know exactly why it's going so well and what we're doing so well in terms of supporting new folks entering the workplace at high wages. But we certainly know we couldn't do it without all of you as employers, and the processes and supports that we'll talk about today. Some of it may seem a little much, some of it may seem convoluted, but what we really try and do is ensure that the first job someone gets is a job they'll succeed in. And that only doesn't provide more support and stability for someone who's just arrived from another country, but it's great that you won't need to keep retraining folks, as we know is often the case. A vacancy is one thing, but someone who you've just finished training who doesn't work out is another serious cost that we know employers are footing the bill for. So we try and reduce all of that all around. And again, we've been successful in bringing some folks on board to a variety of different companies. So there are differences in status of the folks that we're welcoming and supporting. The semantics of which are really explicit to the work authorization they have and the duration of that. It's actually changed in a really positive way. But it also has to do with some of the resources they have available. Point blank, you will never be referred a candidate from our employment services who isn't eligible to work. What is important to understand is some folks may have access to certain resources that others don't based on their status. Some folks have been waiting for longer for their work authorization. Some folks may have more readily access to driver's licenses or social security numbers. These are things that we will know the answers for, as will our folks when they're walking in the door to meet with you to be onboarded. But it is important to understand that when we use the word New Vermonter, we use it inclusively. And it can mean a range of folks from different countries, backgrounds, statuses, and how they arrived here and how long they've been here. Many asylum seekers have been in our country, living in our communities for up to a year before they have work authorization. And so the fact that someone may be newly entering your workplace does not necessarily mean they're new to the community. And these are all things that, again, we're all here to help support you in understanding and working with. Again, we have a lot of different partners, and I'll provide an opportunity in a bit for Amir to share the process. But Abdul, I did see you're on. If you can turn on your camera and just give a wave. Abdul is the case manager, employment services person at ECDC and works very closely with us here at the BDCC in supporting folks on their first job. Um, We again, so this partnership between ECDC and BDCC really is where we meet first with folks and really understand where they are, what their needs are, what their aspirations are, and then we refer them out, often very quickly, to our partners at um, Department of Labor, who enroll folks in WIOA, provide those suite of services that new Vermonters are eligible for, the same as Vermonters who have been here not through an immigrant program. And it's been great, working with the folks at Labor. Um, we also have partners around English language learning that you may or may not have engagement with and support from as folks join your teams. And so World Learning is they're both actually out on Putney Road, quite close to each other, and different new Vermonters based on their English language and educational needs will be enrolled in programs related to that. Again, to the extent that you as employers communicate what language proficiencies are really, expected at your place of work, allows us to better prepare folks. And we'll talk more about that soon. So one thing I'll be clear about is that this webinar does not talk about the culture of inclusivity and welcomeness and diversity, equity, inclusion. Those are all things that employers, can and should be investing in, both from a leadership, HR, and whole organization level. And generally speaking, discriminate, we all know that you're not allowed to discriminate in the workplace, and explicit discrimination is illegal. And one thing that we know is that there's also a lot of unintentional discrimination that happens during the onboarding or hiring process due to documentation. And we have a very quick, again, not a lawyer, any explicit legal questions you should talk to a lawyer about. And if you have those questions, you can reach out to, myself, and we can put you in touch with the immigration lawyers that we work with. But, all new Vermonters still need to fill out the I-9. And when they show up to do that, you may see documents that you're not familiar with. And most folks have an employment authorization document. Some folks have other documents that we'll go over in just a second. But I think the big things are folks getting your social security number takes time, even if you've been issued one, or you've been approved for one. And often employers and HR systems don't know how to deal with that. And so you don't need a social security number to work. Social security numbers are mostly used for tax implications. And so our recommendation, if possible, is that you can you withhold the regular deductions that they would normally have and put them in escrow or just keep track of it. And then when they get their social security number, you submit that to the way you normally would. There are other ways around this, but again, just to be clear, not having a social security number is not an eligible or legal excuse to not employ someone. Yeah. The next is tax, the other stuff around onboarding and all of those other forms that you may require one of your employees to fill out. They're complicated for folks whose native language is English and have lived in this country under this tax system or benefit system their entire lives. And so, and we'll talk about this again later, that we make sure that you have the support in the form of interpretation, translation, that these very technical documents and, bureaucratic activities that have to do with onboarding, you have help from folks to get through this process. The last thing I'll mention is re-verification. And so here are the list of documents that you are likely to see from a new Vermonter. Most folks will have an employment authorization document in EAD. It looks like an ID, but it says employment authorization card or document on it. Some folks may only have in I-94. It's going to be a paper document, and it often looks like it was printed off a website, and it has information there. There you'll see and it gives instructions on how to, you know, where in the I-9 that form all of those numbers go. On folks' employment authorization cards or documents, there is an expiration date. It has normally been 2 years, and that has been a real challenge for employers because we came upon the 2-year mark of when our Afghan neighbors arrived, and all of a sudden, all of these documents were expiring, and we need to be reissued. And at that point, employers can and should, must re-verify, which means just go have them refill an I-9. And if um, any of their documentation changed, it would be reflected in that document. And if not, it's always good to have it on hand. Again, you are responsible as an employer to make sure that you're re-verifying. You could just do it the same day every year if you don't want to keep track of everyone's individual expiration dates, or you could set yourself a reminder for when the expiration on their employment documents are. So that's like the tricky news. It's been a very difficult reissuing process this time around because we had so many folks, our Afghan neighbors, come at once. The good news is as a community of employers, we complained to the federal government enough that they have now changed the majority of those expiration dates to 5 years. So anyone who's entering the country who's using a work authorization card, who's arriving after September 27th of this year, should have a 5-year expiration date. So you just got a little bit more breathing room until you need to worry about rechecking. Last thing to be clear is that this is not a sponsorship. This is not a visa relationship that you have with this employee. It is not your responsibility as an employer to file for the renewal or support the renewal of their employment authorization cards. That is something that our folks are expected to do on their own and have legal aid and legal support from the community to do so. Any questions on this before I move on? Again, I'm not a lawyer. Anything specific, you should email to us directly where we can put you in touch with someone who is a lawyer and can speak affirmatively about any of this. Any questions? Again, our employment services staff, Amir and Abdul, have probably done hundreds of I-9s since they started this. And so if you're hiring someone, and that's who will be showing up with these new hires, and they'll be here to help you navigate any of your questions. Great. So the last thing before we get into some processes and procedures and really the tools you'll have at disposal as an employer, the BDCC and our partners are implementing a new tool. It's it's an app called Vermont Employment Pathfinder, and it's open for all Vermonters, but we are, implementing it specifically with our new Vermonter population. And it uses an AI-driven interview process to solicit the skills that an individual may have based on formal work experience and perhaps informal work experience. And particularly for this population, if a job was called something differently in a home country, it's less focused on job title and much more about skills. So once a skill set is identified with an individual based on their experiences, whether it is skills they've learned on the job or skills they've picked up taking care of their families or being informal entrepreneurs, all of these skills are collated and then matched with ONET job data. And so what it does is it recommends to us and the individual, here are the careers and ONET jobs in Vermont that align with your skill sets. And so what it allows us to do is provide better matching so that the folks we're recommending to enter your workplaces have a lot or at least some of the skills you're looking to hire for. What you will begin to see is that you'll see many folks coming with very similar looking resumes because the other functionality of this tool is it helps generate resumes based on this process. So if you start seeing a bunch of resumes that look quite similar in format and structure, it isn't because they're all copying from each other. It's because they're all using a tool that is really supporting them in putting together a resume that's meaningful for you, that actually gives you as an employer insight into what their skills are. So again, some of these jobs are mine, some of them are of samples, and nonprofit language, the job titles of most nonprofit folks are vague at best. And so regardless of what experiences professionally someone's coming in with, there'll always be these top skills that you'll see that relate to the job they're applying for. And so this builds equity within the community because regardless of folks' language backgrounds, they'll have a standardized resume process based on their experiences. So we hope that it both helps you as employers and helps our job seekers take credit for the skills that they have and you hire for those roles. There's also an opportunity for you as an employer to get your job postings directly into the system. And so if you want to do that, if there's one job you always have open that you really want to welcome folks into on a recurring basis, let's talk. We can get that into the system. And so that folks know as they're filling out their profile, they'll get a little recommendation to say, have you thought about this? You might be a good fit. And they can just go directly to your website, they'll upload this resume, and you'll be off to the races there. So the real focus of this, any questions before I move on? Great. So the real focus is supporting you as employers to be an employer of choice for new Vermonters. There is an abundance of job openings in our region. That's not news to anyone. But some workplaces are better equipped to onboard and benefit from the skills that our foreign trained workers are bringing to our community. And so the focus of the rest of this meeting is really to help you as employers prepare yourselves, your workplaces to be this employer of choice, so that you know where you can always find reliable talent, folks who are engaged in their community and are really showing up to do a hard day's work. And there's a lot of different components to this that we'll talk through. As I started off, engaging with your partners and resources collaboratively is really important. There are a lot of really great reasons why why a new Vermonter may miss a day of work in their first 90 days here in the country. And the idea of a no call, no show is sometimes it's certainly the responsibility of the new Vermonter, and sometimes they were called that morning by a case manager to say the only time we can get this doctor's appointment that you must do is today. And so while we wished that system was less chaotic, um, it always provides opportunities for us to recommunicate expectations and to work through the communication barriers we face due to language and bureaucracy. So, and the best way to do that is to work with your partners to make sure if there's a problem, you know who to call. Because we all want good, successful workers, regardless of where we are on the employee or employer side. Again, supporting a multilingual workforce is not just it's not just if you have the intention it works out. That's helpful, but there's some real tools that we will share with you and best practices that can really help with onboarding and ongoing retention of folks whose native language may not be English. There's some basic policies and changes that we've seen, have been beneficial that help recognize the diversity of your workplace without creating different categories of employees and without providing certain folks with different opportunities, latitude than others. And then really, how do you demonstrate inclusivity and welcomeness into company culture? And that is where intention is key. And we'll talk a bit more about that. So I'm going to um, first share the difference between the employer and the employee intake process so that you know what's happened up until you meet your candidate. And I'll talk. Yeah. So one of the benefits that we've found is that cohort-driven recruitment and onboarding is really effective in lowering costs for an employer from the onboarding perspective. And so if you have more than one job opening that you could hire at once, what that allows us to do is to consolidate and scale the support we can provide. So a great example is the cost of an translator or interpreter is the same, whether they're supporting one individual or 5 individuals who speak that language. So if you have an interpreter or translator on site, it simply is more cost effective for that individual to be training and supporting more than one employee at once. The other benefit is that new employees, especially those with language barriers, learn better together because we have an incredible diversity of folks from within the New Vermonter community. There are people in the same family who have a variety of different language and education backgrounds. And so often in your team of 5 or 3, however you go about it, there may be one person who has pretty good English proficiency, and they can also be a de facto translator and training support person for the rest of the team. And so if someone doesn't know exactly didn't completely understand something that happened during a training, they can turn to a peer and say, did you understand that? And they said, yes, and can explain it in their native language. Or they all look to each other and say, no, none of us got this piece. Let's make sure the interpreter or translator goes through it again. And so this is also where things like safety and other really important concepts really should be delivered by an interpreter and translator. Google Translate is great. Amir is going to share another tool that's great for translating. And if there's something that you really need to ensure every employee understands with no mistake and no confusion, that's where we're willing and able and happy to provide interpretation and translation support if you have a cohort of employees that we can deliver that to. And then it also helps us solve other barriers, the transportation challenges that we know folks have along, reaching second shift jobs. The more folks we have working those hours, the louder we can advocate for off hours transportation solutions. And we hope to have some great updates about that in the coming year as well. So now we'll talk about everything that happens in the process of as new Vermonters arrive, from when they arrive to our country to when they arrive to the interview or onboarding session with you. And so first, I'd love for Abdul to introduce himself. Go ahead if you want to say hi, Abdul.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Abdul Wahed Rizwanzai. I work with ECDC as Employment Navigator, and we work closely with BDCC and to find employment opportunities for new Vermonters.
Great. And so what we'll see is what we'll go through. Amir is going to walk through these different phases, and he and Abdul work hand in hand as folks progress through this, and based on their needs, on the relationships, and whether it's their first job or a different job, that's how we divide up the work. So Amir, if you'd like to go, and Abdul, feel free to chime in as Amir goes along with any additional information.
Thanks, Alex. So what you're seeing is a SOP that we are a standard operating procedure that we are having with ECDC, as well as we are sharing this exact SOP with the new Vermonters once they are coming to the area. So the steps that we are taking to get them a job is starting with initial intake. So before that, sorry, I just forgot to introduce myself. My name is Amir Samar, and I'm the BDCC Workforce Project Manager, and I'm helping also new Vermonters with their employment journey. So with the first step, which is initial intake, and the ECDC's employment case manager is doing, and that's about getting information about the new Vermonters' background, the employment background, what they did, and as well as their education, and also the English language level proficiency. The next step is the pre-employment readiness training that BDCC is delivering, and it's going on every Monday afternoons 2 to 4:30 p.m. at SIT in campus. And we are delivering this training within 60 days of the new Vermonters arriving into the area. And what this training is about is mostly facilitating the new Vermonters smooth transition and integration of them to the workforce, and also understanding the American workplaces, what are the expectations, what are their rights and responsibilities. And also in this training, we are helping folks with their job searching, resume building, and also how they can build a good interview skills. And as Alex was mentioning, we are also helping them with filling out job application, tax forms, I-9s, W-4s, things like that. And also with this training, we are training them how to communicate effectively with their employers if they have a problem, if there is they have an appointment, a doctor's appointment, or a social security appointment, how they can effectively communicate with their employers. Also, VOA enrollment, Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act. There is a program through VDOL, Vermont Department of Labor, that both ACDC and BDCC are facilitating the enrollment process of new Vermonters in this program. And there are some sources and services that they are able to get through this program, like work clothing, transportation, like bikes, getting those things. And also the BDCC team, we are facilitating the site visits and job tours for new Vermonters once they are ready enough to get their first employment. Job application and onboarding, again, BDCC and ACDC employment staff are doing this for the new Vermonters. And on-the-job training and support and check-ins, if there is any check-ins needed, such as review meetings, or it could be a promotion meeting, and there is an interpretation is needed. So we are supporting this service free of charge to the employers. And also connecting new Vermonters with any ongoing career trainings, coaching, and also education opportunities. Also, we are sharing some of the jobs and job sites. Of course, we are not gatekeepers. They don't have to find their employment through us. I mean, BDCC and ECDC, they can just navigate their first job if their English is good enough to do so. So we are sharing some of the job sites that they can just search for their desired jobs, and as well as some of the service providers in the area, such as the ELL providers like Vermont Adult Learning and other sources available. Or there is also MCC, Multicultural Community Center, in the center of the town, that they can just get some of the services there, like English classes that are going on there every day. And other sources like VOA program, Hireability, Reach Up and Reach Ahead, what type of the services they can expect, or even with the VSAC, that some of the folks are arriving with a very good educational backgrounds, and they have some type of degrees, and they want to continue their education here. So we are also facilitating that with VSAC, and they can just get those fundings there, as well as CCV if there is some trainings and classes that they can get through CCV.
Yeah. And so, as Amir mentioned, anyone, no one has to work with the BDCC to find a job. And but we cannot ensure that people who haven't worked with us have gone through all of these steps that, again, Amir and Abdul have spent almost 2 years now putting together to make sure folks succeed. So we're not gatekeepers. We really hope to be entry points into successful job placements. And if you want, as an employer, to have your jobs be better featured, if you are really eager to recruit, you can work with Amir and offer to host a job tour or a job site. You are always welcome to come up to World Learning during a job readiness training, and Amir will say, hey, come on this day at this time and come meet with the folks who are looking for jobs. So this is a system that's set up with multiple opportunities for you as employers to plug into. And it is not a place and pray model, as some of you may be familiar with. It's a lot of thought and planning has gone into this entire procedure to make sure when we're referring you to someone to you, they're ready to work, and that we think that there will always be certain challenges, but that they're a qualified employee.
Yeah, thanks, Alex, for mentioning that. Just to add on those points, if a new Vermonter is getting a job through a friend or himself, we're still supporting them with their employment journey. If if you need any type of help that we have mentioned here, you can just supporting them in this journey. So for overcoming the communication challenges, there are again some sources available that we are using for supporting new Vermonters. There are some free English language learning classes and other type of classes available to different providers like VAL or Tutorial Center and those Title II funding recipients. And also there is Google Translate. However, with some languages, it's not, it doesn't work perfectly, but still Google Translate, you can use it for many different languages. And as was mentioned before, there is interpretation and translation available for the employers through ECDC and BDCC. And the last one, of course, signage is cheap. And again, you can just get it through Google Translate and or other services available. So next slide, please. And also there is a very good free translation services available. It's Tarjimly. It's an app. You can use it on your phone, or you can use it on your laptops. And as it's in these screenshots, it's a very simple application. You can just, you're signing up with your email, and for whatever reason, you can just ask for interpreter, and it will be live, and it's on a phone call. And we have used up to now, we have at least, I believe, 8 different language speakers within the New Vermonters community, and we were able to use Tarjimly on each and every those languages. And again, it's both for iOS and Android, and it's free, and you can use it on whatever reason that you need.
Great. Thank you, Amir. And so I think, between the suite of different language support available to you, I think it's up to you to really determine when you are comfortable using Google Translate, That's something when they're on the job and you just need a word interpreted or translated to make sure everyone's on the same page, that might be great. If you're coming into a check-in meeting, maybe Tarjimly is okay or enough. And then there are things where it's really clear you want there to be no miscommunication. And that is always an opportunity to call Amir or Abdul and to set up a time for either them or a different interpreter or translator to come in and help facilitate that conversation. One of the benefits of the team we have is that a reminder that the BDCC, our clients, are the employers. We work on your behalf, and Abdul is working on the employee's behalf. And a solution for both of us is the solution that works for everyone. And so I think that's really where calling, either or both of them in to help work through any challenges is a way to make sure that all the right folks are in the room with everyone's best interests in mind. So that's communication. And it'll always be difficult, and often miscommunications are the best opportunities to learn. So long as everyone's safe and there's no jeopardizing what's going on in the workplace, overcoming communication barriers within a workplace is often a form of bonding and solidarity between folks who are doing the same job who come from very different places. There are some other things that as a workplace you can think about and perhaps implement to ensure that all of your employees, but particularly those who come from cultures you're not familiar with, feel welcome and have the both the feeling that they are being welcomed and the ability to retain a lot of their own cultural or religious practices, especially as they're reintegrating into the United States. And so creating opportunities to celebrate all cultures. I did before we welcomed our first new Vermonter here in Windham County. I traveled to Chittenden County where they've had a lot of refugee resettlement. And there was a major employer who said, yeah, so we started implementing celebrations for certain cultures that, of new folks who we were seeing. And then we realized we weren't doing enough to celebrate cultures that we know are represented in our lifelong or more, a longer duration of Vermont residents, or your rural New England culture. And so they both celebrate Eid, which is a major holiday for folks of the Muslim faith, and they subsidize hunting licenses. And so I think that thinking creatively of ways to make sure everyone feels like their cultures are valued, that's where a lot of little things and thoughtfulness goes a long way. You can't give everyone a day off every time they need, but implementing something like floating holidays empowers the employee to prioritize what's most important to them. And so that, folks may prefer to, be out during Christian holidays or Jewish holidays or Muslim holidays, whatever you may see in the workplace, or you know, they'd rather work on Thanksgiving, and so, any of these options, I think it allows you to approach folks from an agnostic perspective, and that so folks of one background don't get more or are treated differently. It's that every employee is empowered to take time to prioritize the way they see fit. And so again, floating holidays is a great way. It's a policy change that may not add any time off for anyone, but it allows folks to use that time off they are entitled to differently and therefore more equitably. That's just one example, and I think it often has to do with your shifts and how your internal culture and company already operates. Wellness spaces is another one that, where different folks have different needs. If you're a nursing mother, you may need that lactation space. If you have strict religious practices, you may need prayer space. Folks who have, differences in mobility may need physical accommodations to the work site. These aren't new concepts generally when you think about them within the context of how you're already operating your business. And so again, it's that thoughtfulness of approach to say, yeah, well, this space is empty 80% of the day. Why can't we make it available to someone to do this, or a place to have meetings with an interpreter, you name it, prayer space, lactation space, thinking creatively is something that we encourage all employers to do. The other thing is around training and onboarding. And one thing that I believe to be true is that experiential learning is often can transcend language barriers. So the opportunity for a new employee to spend some time with a well-seasoned employee and watching what they're doing, having an opportunity to get that hands-on experience in a safe environment goes a long way, in addition to the traditional training procedures that you may go through. In many cases, your traditional training timeline will take longer with folks with a language barrier. And so a way to shorten that on the other side is to make sure that all of the training isn't happening in a classroom setting. Some of it's happening on the job where people can reinforce those skills that they're learning by seeing and by doing with their own hands. Um, and then again, reiterating that the cohort model provides a lot of support and opportunity for folks to learn together. There are instances in which, a company hired, I believe, 5 or 6 folks at once, and the person who with the best English, who had good English, and was a hard worker, was promoted just a bit to become like a training associate. And so now this person is a liaison between the HR and training department and these folks from their community in this cohort to really be that liaison and go between. And of course, with more work and responsibility should come a pay raise, but paying someone an extra dollar an hour is more cost effective as an employer than hiring an entire interpreter and translator who may be $25 an hour. And so again, these are ways as an employer to think about reducing costs of external support by investing in the folks who want to work with you today. Questions about that? Great. Or Amir, would you like to tell your story about EAD, or should I?
Sure, I can do that. So some of the folks, so it was, I think, last year. So it was Eid Day, and we were receiving some emails and phone calls from different employers asking that there is a no call, no show within the Afghan or the Muslim workers that they have, that they're not here today. And I was like, so today's Eid for them. It's a holiday and it's a big thing that they are celebrating. So that's the reason that they thought that it's the same thing as their home country. So if it's Eid, no one is working. So one of the lessons that we learn and learn how to overcome.
Yep. And so what Amir was able to do was to provide a cultural learning opportunity for HR managers to say, here's what happened. Is that it's, none of your employees would show up on Christmas Day unless they were explicitly told you need to show up on Christmas, because the assumption is work is closed that day. And because the employers reached out to Amir instead of firing everyone, Amir could then also go and talk with the workers and say, next time, and generally speaking, you need to provide notice for your employers when you'll be missing work. And so what could have been a really challenging event for a bunch of different employers and workers was instead a great learning opportunity that now we can solve. And so we not only provided greater intercultural understanding from our employers, but we also provided more explicit expectations and cultural understanding of the American workplace to our new Vermonters. And that happened because the employers called them here and they let them know that something was going on. It wasn't that we pretended everything was fine when it wasn't. It was there was a problem that we wanted to get to the bottom of, and together we solved it. And so the last few things I'll touch on is building inclusive and welcoming and welcomeness to the existing workplace culture. I think when we talk about workplace culture, and we talk about a culture of safety, generally speaking, we communicate in the workplace using signage. And that is something we often do. And it's the easiest place to start, is that often you can take all the signs that you have printed out around safety, around culture, and that is where maybe a professional interpretation or translation service might be worth the cost. You send it all out to someone. It's, 50 cents a page or whatever that they charge. Amir or Abdul can help source that, and you can just update your signage. And now you got signage in different languages, and so now it's a good way to ensure that that information is presented, and it's a very cheap way to show your employees that you're thinking of them and that you're intentionally trying to ensure that the workplace is a multilingual place. Again, working closely with the partners, calling Abdul and Amir when there's challenges, and making sure that we're providing opportunity for intercultural miscommunication or misunderstanding to be solved. And I think that's the other thing that's really important. We see a lot of really great stuff on outwardly facing documents and around your mission and values and vision on inclusivity, and interpreting or translating those statements and having those available to be seen in the workplace is great too. Because again, with folks with language barriers, that's something they might miss in your employee handbook, or that they might not get on your website. And so if you're an organization that has put thought and energy into policies, values, visions, missions around inclusivity, make sure you're saying that in the workplace, because just hearing that, and that intention there is often the foundation of which we overcome any kind of misunderstanding if it's there. And just again, knowing folks are trying is really where all of this work starts, even if we're not successful, which we aren't always. I will everyone will get a copy of this. Linked here are some additional resources around cultural orientation. We will also include some additional resources around best practices for employers in our email with this as well. And then making sure your leadership is on board. And that, this is something that I heard someone say up in Chittenden County. It was from Twin Craft Skincare, who's one of the leading employers of New Vermonters in that region. They say, your culture isn't actually defined by a mission statement. It's defined by the worst tolerated behavior by the most senior person. And so that means that if there's one person who's being really unwelcoming, and there's no there's no follow-up and no one in leadership acting to change that behavior of unwelcomeness, that's going to be the culture. And so it's up to all of us as employees and as leaders to do that. I do want to, before I'll wrap up and I'll answer Rand's excellent question in the chat. Intention and attention is more important than how fast things happen. There's one example of an employer who has a quite unique job, a quite unique way of compensating employees based on that job. And it's taking a lot longer for some folks to get to productivity and to settle in. The challenge is time. And it's the fact that the employer continues to get in touch with Amir and Abdul. They have an interpreter and a translator on site, and it's taking longer, but they're an employer of choice. And so even though it is more challenging than the traditional onboarding process, this employer is now inviting facilities managers from Massachusetts, from Connecticut, and from Florida to come up to Brattleboro and learn, how does it look different? How does our typical onboarding and training process look different for folks who language might be a barrier? And so instead of saying, it's not happening fast enough, they're not at 100% yet, let's move on, they're saying, yeah, it might take longer, but here's 5, 6, 7 employees we otherwise might not have. And that's really it. And being iterative. This didn't work. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Try something new. And it is that continued attempts and engagement that is really the symbol and signal to folks that you're doing what you can as an employer to be welcoming and supportive. Again, communicating effectively with case managers and support organizations is as important sometimes, and even more so, than communicating with employees. Because if you still see that there's a language barrier or a communication barrier between an HR staff member or an operations staff member, and an employee, that's when you really should reach out to one of us, and we'll come in and make sure that, well, let's redo that training session with an interpreter on site. And that's something we've done in the past a number of times, and we're happy to do. And then lastly, you know, a lot of folks are very underemployed when they first arrive, and that it is often the case that if a new Vermonter chooses to leave your place of employment for a different opportunity, that is a good natural progression in their lives and in their upward mobility. And often your ability as an employer to provide folks with stability and their first job and reliable income is something that allows them to begin planning the rest of their lives here as new Americans and new Vermonters. And so there are times when someone will leave for an explicit reason that you identify as a shortcoming on either of their behalves, and it's something you may work to fix in the future. Or it's that someone who has a master's degree in their home country can finally get back to school and enter the career field they initially had. And so the fact that they have saved enough money working with you, that they feel like they're a part of the community and they understand this country enough that they can dive into their next opportunity, that is also a sign that you've been a good employer and you've been a really great place for them to work. And so those are all things that we can really identify, is to say, are you a great employer for someone's first job, or are you a great employer for someone who's just graduated from this training in the community? And so now we know if we want more people at, and I'll pick at the first person I see, GPI construction, Anthony, with, you know, up there, you know, it's, you know, some folks are going to be ready right when they arrive, and some folks might need to go to the career center, and some folks might need to do X and Y and Z. And it's just communicating together about what your place of employment can do for someone that allows us to put them on that pathway into it. Now, I will answer Rand's question. Is right now, this fall, we've received, I believe, 75 folks that are currently here living on World Learning Campus, and soon to be, you know, find permanent housing in the community. And so, in the next year or two, you know, the way this works is that, you know, you get an annual allocation of cases that you can resettle. So I believe it's up to 125. And again, ECDC can correct me if I'm wrong, you know, annually. But when folks come throughout the year is dependent on a lot of different factors. And so there will be times like now is a great time that if you have 3 or 4 job openings, now is a great time to recruit a cohort, because Amir is at World Learning Campus every Monday. There are, I believe, 70 something folks living there. And so you will be able to engage with a lot of job seekers and, in theory, onboard a large number of job seekers all at the same time. And so this coordinated support we're able to provide job seekers and you as employers is made easier when there are more folks rather than less folks. So that's really the big and little picture of you know, why we believe, you know, you can and should be recruiting from these folks when your place of employment is ready. Amir or Abdul, have I left anything out?
Alex, I just want to add something regarding the communication. Sometimes, like, it's time consuming for employers to communicate with the new Vermonters in the workplace. So we recommend if they have any question or if they want to communicate with the employees, so we can step in and we can translate and help. As an example, whenever the new Vermonters, they need to have to take a leave or time off, so they are coming to us, and we are then sending an email to the employer and just telling them and letting them know that Mahmoud, Ahmad, or anyone is in need of taking a time off, like for 2 days or 3 days, or he or she needs a time off for a doctor appointment. So this will be easy for the employers to have direct communication with us instead of having communication with the employees, just to save the time of the employers wasting their time communicating them, or especially when they have training, if they are doing the training for the employees themselves, so it will take longer. So it's better that if they tell us that we have this training, then we can communicate, because we have like a lot of resources for interpretation and translation. So instead of providing that training by the employers, it's better that we can do the same training for them.
Great. Thank you so much. So I know we're just over our hour. Again, this is recorded. It'll be posted and shared along with the PowerPoint and some additional resources. But I've got as much time as you folks on the call need to answer any questions, and I will just make sure this was actually my last slide, and we'll open it up to the group. Any questions, comments? Great. So again, if you're a place of employment that hopes to hire from this group, feel free to reach out to Abdul or Amir. Their emails will be included in the email you receive. And again, if it's the case that you're hoping to onboard a new Vermonter, you'll be working with us quite a bit, and we are excited for that opportunity. Thanks, everyone. As always, reach out with any questions, and we appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Alex.